there's anything wrong with this, but really this is maybe stuff that's not flying off the shelves. And it's not really about us looking differently. It's about just staying in a way healthier. So today I'm not going to talk about smoking. I hope everybody knows it's bad. I'm not going to talk about being tanning outside because I know that's what you all really know. But today I'm going to bring to the surface some of the things that most of my patients always ask and they said they really want to hear about today. And that is, what can I change? What is it in my diet? Is there some sort of things that I put inside my body that will actually help me not age as fast? So we're going to talk a little bit about some things that we encounter on the daily. My agenda for today is going to be really twofold. One is I'm going to tell you a story of how genetics transfers to food, and we're going to call it From Gene to Table. And the second one is going to be whether to supplement or not. And we're going to start with one thing today. So really, the gene to table is a joke on farm to table concept. And that is how we're learning how certain things are good or bad for us with the help of science. So From Gene to Table really started as an idea from a patient of mine who said, oh, I just noticed that all things that start with the letter P are generally bad for you. So I was like, what do you mean? And I just moved to California, so it was all new to me. So she said, well, you know, phosphates, petrolatum, phthalates, parabens. And I was like, okay, well, let me really see what it is. So the first thing on the list was phosphates in the diet. And little did I know, and I learned a lot. So I'm going to take you on a journey of this phosphate story with me. And the phosphate story really goes to this gene called klotho. And you're like, what is that, Dr. M? This is actually a picture that is supposed to represent the three goddesses from Greek mythology that decide how long we're going to live. Literally, the one kind of spins it, the other one measures it, the third one cuts it, and that's going to determine our longevity. So this is how this gene got its name. And this is us, I guess, on the bottom, and the three goddesses decide our fate. Klotho is actually something that was determined to be an anti-aging protein, and it was found to be really in lower concentrations as we get older, and people that tend to age better tend to have it in higher proportions, and it's known to extend lifespan. What is it involved in is really that it regulates phosphate metabolism. So that's the concentrations of phosphates in your body. And it's found in highest concentrations really in the kidneys, those two little things somewhere in the back of our trunk that are supposed to regulate the excretion of phosphates. So maybe my patient was onto something. How do we learn things about anything that comes in science? We learn from animals, right? Nobody likes to do all that stuff, but we have valuable lessons. And one is that whenever they have mice where they mutate the klotho so it doesn't function as well, they actually age very fast. They have a short lifespan. They have heart disease. Their skin gets thin and atrophies. They get osteoporosis. They actually even develop emphysema like smokers, and they even age prematurely and develop infertility. So this is an example of a klotho deficient mice, and it's not the big and plump one, but it's the small raggedy one. So when somebody doesn't have enough klotho, which they did to this little mouse, they really have issues and they just look like a withered older thing. So where do we see in humans decreased levels of klotho under natural circumstances? Like in what kind of diseases? Well, really, it's chronic kidney disease. And in chronic kidney disease, if you are a patient or you know somebody that's a patient, there's issues with phosphates in the body to the point that sometimes you have to get medications to lower it. But one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that chronic kidney disease is a premature aging syndrome. These are some of the faces of chronic kidney diseases and the klotho and phosphate metabolism. And you can see the skin discoloration in people as young as 40s and just more of like what we call skin atrophy, which means that leathering kind of thinning of the skin. And there's also impaired wound healing, which really, when you're younger, you shouldn't have an issue with, but it does develop as you age. Why is it then important to kind of monitor your kidneys and watch that klotho? Well, two things that are very common. One is diabetes, because diabetes can affect the kidneys and can affect lower levels of klotho. And the other one is high blood pressure. Now, even if we didn't have high blood pressure, I feel like this past year threw us all into a spin. So if you were a 120, you're probably pushing a 130 now. The point is, it is aging us prematurely. So all of you who felt that this year it was stress, well, this is maybe one of those ways where like different kind of things tell you how the genes and some of the metabolisms will go ultimately into a real presentation. This is, the token medical student chart from a textbook, which shows how your phosphates in the body get regulated. So interesting thing is that you can actually have phosphates in the body from like internal organs, but the other thing that we actually can monitor as human beings is how much we put in our diet. So how phosphates in our diet can be controlled as a way to maybe modulate how we age. And they give us this molecular basis of food and aging. So let's talk about phosphates in the diet. There is such a term of phosphotoxicity, meaning just too much of this. So there are certain levels that are needed, but really, whenever they looked at humans, high dietary phosphate load has been shown to be associated with this premature aging and short lifespan. Same as the mouse, same as the whole Clotho thing that told us, and just a lot of oxidative stress and a lot of DNA damage. So what are we supposed to eat, and what kind of things have I found by like reading the hundreds of articles and with the help of talking to colleagues and my medical students? Well, the total adult body store is supposed to be about 700 grams. And I'm going to mention some of the stuff of how and which forms it exists. 700 is really what adults should get as a daily recommended value of phosphorus. And this is a picture of foods that are naturally high in phosphorus. The interesting thing is that there's, in a way, good types of phosphorus and bad. And I will go over it, but really these are some of the examples of like animal proteins and how much gets absorbed. The reason I have that stuff in the end in the blue is to tell you that certain sources, such as like milk, yogurt, they may have a lot, but not all of it gets absorbed. But if you go all the way down to carbonated cola drink, which is, like a soda, you can see that it's maybe not that much, but all of it gets absorbed. So it tends to be that different types of phosphorus get absorbed differently. So studies show that really they exist as organic and inorganic. So organic is the natural phosphorus from the berries, from the milk, which is recommended, again, in the normal values. But then there's such a thing as inorganic, which are these phosphate-containing food additives. Now, who in the world ever came up with some sort of a concept where you will need to add phosphate to anything, and why is it there? Well, when you start reading labels on inorganic phosphorus ingredients in restaurant foods and stuff you buy every day, it's all over the place. And I was trying to figure out why. And it seems that it's the stuff that actually makes things moist, makes things plump, which gives things that, like, for example, that nice cheese, kind of like that movement rather than it being dry, but it's everywhere. Literally, it's even in some of our favorite cereal. So even our kids get some of these inorganic phosphorus. And then the token poster child for high phosphorus, and we all know this is not supposed to be good for us, but if this brown drink is going to age me, and then maybe it's something that we should skip. And a lot of studies have been looking into just Coca-Cola, no, sorry, not Coca-Cola, I shouldn't say, cola drinks and its effect. And whether that's true or not, more studies will need to be, but here is what I have to say. A long story with a short answer. Inorganic phosphorus may be one of those things in our diet whenever we try to analyze Western diet in people with premature aging syndromes that may contribute to stuff. So bottom line, you saw all the foods in the presentation, you'll get a couple of notes. We do suggest, according to literature, to avoid high phosphorus things. And if you do have hypertension and diabetes, to control it, to prevent development of kidney disease. And then if it's brown versus a clear liquid, maybe the Perrier may be a little bit better. Okay, so that was your first thing. This was a second question that people have asked me over and over, and that is to supplement or not. And this is really a topic not only the dermatologists tackle, not only the integrative doctor, every primary care physician, every physician has faced this question, whether themselves looking in the mirror, whether family members or the patient across from them. Because there are so many studies that show that really taking daily vitamins may not prevent anything. It may people feel better, but we still don't know if it's a placebo effect or not. We even know that certain things in high doses may be bad, right? We've learned some of them from the physician studies. And then should you take things when you're sick, for example, like we do vitamin C and zinc because we think they help us get over with colds, or should we just do these things forever? And do they help us live forever? Like, do they help our things? there's issues even with over-the-counter medications. And some of my patients are asking me, and we have written articles on this, like medications such as rapamycin and metformin, who are touted to be the new anti-aging medication. So where do we start? I will say the number one question that everyone really has asked me about for the last 3 years is this one: collagen trends. And I feel as a dermatologist, it was my duty to look into this and find out. So 3 years ago, I was very fortunate to have a visiting pharmacy student from Taiwan. Actually, she was a pharmacist and then medical student. And I asked her, I'm like, can you teach me about collagen? Because all of my patients are asking me. And what we ended up doing is we really went on this path of trying to decipher how good is collagen and what does it do and what's the evidence behind it out there. If you even go to some coffee shops before COVID, you can get this additive in your coffee, and there's little even packets you can do it. So should we do this or not? We did write up an article in 2019 that said oral collagen supplementation, and we did a systematic review of all derm applications. We really wanted to know if there's any implications for skin, for hair, or anything else. The cute thing is that this actually made it into the New York Times. Nobody called us to interview us, but they did interview some other doctors to talk about our work. So it was fun. It was still very exciting for us from UCI to kind of make it in the New York Times, at least with our efforts to try to get to the bottom of this, if there is any benefit to collagen supplements. So what is collagen? When you look under the microscope, collagen is part of your skin that almost looks like those wiry ropes in construction. It's tight, it interlocks, and it keeps the structure. It creates that scaffolding that kind of holds the house together for, like, I don't know, that's what I kind of think of it. But it's very abundant in the whole body. So it's not just skin, it's part of a whole lot of other things. It comes in several different types, and type 1 and 3 are the ones that are most prominent in skin. When you look at a skin, what does this look like? This kind of looks like a bone, right? But it's really just dried out skin. So this is that scaffolding I was telling you. Almost looks like the honey thing on beehive. And it's just cute how nature repeats itself and how it likes this structure. So this is what it looks like dry. This is dried out skin, and this is what the collagen network looks like. And it's almost like an apartment building for everything to come in place. But in real life, it's mushy, it's gooey, it's full of stuff that keeps us supple until we start growing up and it kind of starts drying out. So how do we dry out? We dry out with time. The difference between the younger skin and the more grown-up skin is that really not only is that collagen becoming weaker, but that network, that interlocking kind of starts falling down. So things thin out. And then the elasticity changes because it's associated with other types of fibers. Bottom line is, once was a tight tent, now it starts becoming a deflated little stretched out balloon. I like the sponge analogy, a nice plump sponge, and then it just kind of gets these little dried out look to it in the long term. Here's an example of how we dermatologists look at things. We look at things under the dermatoscope, which is a little light when you go and get your skin exam. We look, and then we do biopsies to look at it under the microscope. So this is an example of a skin of somebody that's within the first decade of life, hopefully a 10-year-old, and somebody in the 8th decade of life, hopefully an 80-year-old. So even with a naked eye, you can kind of appreciate that whole thing of the tight tent versus deflated balloon. But here's also a thing what we do when we do a biopsy. So we do a biopsy and we look under the microscope, and the chocolatey stuff in the upper panel, in the middle panel, is collagen. So you can see in the younger person, tons of that chocolate, beautiful, bathing in it. But as we grow up in the 8th decade, barely anything in there, like watered down hot cocoa. Like the bottom panel, that's the elastin. Elastin is the stuff that kind of keeps it stretched out and nice. And you see these nice, beautiful bands and barely anything in the 8th decade. So this is how we actually look at mature skin and try to analyze the changes. Here's what I was trying to tell you about the collagen distribution in the body. You can see that, yes, skin has a lot of it, but look at your things that move us around, your tendons, your ligaments, your cartilage, bones and muscles. So all of the things that we really need to grow up well and for our knees to hold us up. And I would tell you that when we were reading all the studies and trying to write that article on things in skin, I read a lot of articles on Australian rugby players because they have been supplementing them for a whole lot of time trying to learn how this thing affects our body. In real life, we know that collagen is very important because this is an example of what happens when you're born with a disease in collagen. So how old do you think this person is? 60, 70? These are two siblings that are 2 and 4 years old, and they have a collagen disease, and they're just born with abnormal collagen. So they just look old from the get-go. It doesn't really affect just their skin, kind of the joints and some of the vessels too in some kids. Disease called cutis laxa. So how does this all tie in into the collagen craze? Well, somehow in this year, the past year, it was a $4 billion market. When there is something that's popular, there's a lot of things that are good, but there's so many things that are in a way impure, snake oil. So it's really hard to decipher what are the real deal and what does one do. And it's not only the supplements, but just a lot of the food market, even in restaurants, all these like collagen promoting things. So what's the truth and what isn't? Well, we're calling this a collagen craze now, but really this is present across all cultures and traditional things. There's a reason why you give chicken soup for things. There's a reason why bone broths are made from, when you make ramen in Asian things to Russian to, I'm from the Mediterranean, like the bones are everywhere, bone marrows everywhere. That's why certain cultures eat the legs, because this is all how we get collagen from animal sources by heat to be made into something digestible so we can absorb it. Because you can chew on that chicken leg and on that bone, but you're not going to absorb any of it. So how do we get it? The most common sources are in food are from animals. So pork, as I wrote on there, bovine meaning cow, and the younger, the more in the animal, which is really, not cute to somebody that doesn't eat this. And then marine, so some of the fish scales, etc. The formulations that come out there can be confusing, so I'll try to explain some of them so maybe we can make better educated decisions. You can have gelatin, you can have this thing called hydrolysate, and then the smallest particles are called peptides. So let me see if I can try to explain some of this stuff. So the collagen in its native form, like the bone, the chicken legs, is really insoluble. And we use it maybe to do like medication things and like sausage casings. The second way is to digest it a little bit, and it makes gelatin, which, we make it in like cakes and jellos, and then we can have it like in things like gummy bears and stuff. And then the smallest part are really collagen peptides. Those are the smallest things that are made for dietary supplements as the purpose, and then for that powder that's used in food. So that's kind of like the smallest amount, the highest absorption, and really where the whole trend with all this is going. So here's another representation of this. That scaffold that you will find in, for example, the animal part, whatever that may be, gets heated up, and then you can get gelatin, but you still don't absorb it that much. You heat it more, it gets more hydrolyzed, and then you heat it more, you get the smallest particles. So those small particles are really the ones that are going to be present in your supplements and in your pills and the powders that are present in the story. So the collagen studies that we found at the time and that we wrote about when it came to skin was really 8 studies on the hydrolysate. So that's kind of like the bigger chunks, and then the tripeptides and the dipeptides, there were a couple. And these are the recommended daily dosages. I will mention each of them very briefly. So one of the collagen hydrolysates, there were different studies where it showed that it's good for decubitus ulcers. So that's pressure ulcers that people get, for example, when they're bedridden for a while, or if they're in a wheelchair. Studies that addressed its role in dry skin, they were found positive effects in aging and positive effects in skin elasticity. So this is all in humans. The doses in which this was shown in these studies, granted, these studies were small. Some may have been sponsored by companies that make this. So for us, it was really not clear for some of them, but this is what's out there. So if we trust our colleagues, this is what it is. The doses at which they were treated were 2.5 grams to 10 grams a day. And positive effects were noted in some of the studies as early as 8 weeks to 24 weeks. For collagen tripeptides, 3 grams a day is what was recommended, and studies showed that it helps skin hydration as early as day 3, and then skin elasticity. And then it was helpful in people that have eczema or atopic dermatitis. One study was looking if it's better if you take it with vitamin C, and they really didn't see any effects. But you will still find a lot of supplements, they'll say like, oh, this is better because it's with vitamin C. But so far, the studies haven't showed that it's superior. For the dipeptides, really, those are the kind of the latest studies that are out there, and they're used a lot in aging. There was a nice size Chinese female study where for 8 weeks, people were given supplement daily, and they did show that they had increased facial skin moisture and elasticity and less wrinkles according to their imaging. Does the dosage matter? Per the studies that are out there, high dosages are needed when you're trying to treat like wounds, when you're trying to address something, but low dosages were enough for like wrinkles and anti-aging. Some studies looked at things short terms, others long term. For example, if you do a laser procedure, then maybe you just need it for a couple of days, versus if you have issues such as atopic dermatitis, you may take it every day for as long as you can. Who has shown to benefit according to the studies? Most of the studies were honestly done in females and they were healthy, but they also noted when they would do people at different ages that actually the more adult, especially more than 50, tended to benefit more from the collagen. What are the mechanisms? The mechanism wasn't that it prevents any degradation or anything, but like some of the parts of the collagen that get absorbed actually help new collagen to be built. So this is an example of a study in postmenopausal women in which they used this thing called cutometer to kind of test the elasticity. And they noted, this is a beautiful graph that every scientific presentation has to have. They noted that at 4 weeks and 8 weeks, they had better elasticity with a tool called cutometer. So which collagen should I use? This is the question that comes up on everyone's mind, because not all collagen supplements are equal and there's different dosages in different brands. My truth is really the truth of everyone that's kind of on this end of the field, and that is none of this is FDA regulated. So maybe I can tell you, you know, get the blue thing because it's really great. But what if this company gets acquired, or what if they start getting things overseas and then their quality goes down? It's very difficult for me personally to kind of stand behind some brands, but I do have colleagues that maybe have some preferences, and there's always somebody at Samueli that's willing to discuss this with you who knows a little bit better than me. What we know so far is really there's no adverse effects, but it is something that it lasts while you're taking it. In some of the studies where they gave people a lot of this, they may have complained they may be a little bit nauseous, a little bit kind of like bloated. And then in people with kidney failure where they studied pressure ulcers, they really didn't see much of abnormal kidney values. The truth is that a lot of this comes from animal sources. And we know that some of the animal kind of antigens can trigger antibody responses. So for example, if a patient has rheumatoid arthritis or has some sort of inflammation and they tend to react to some of this, like I don't know whether this can have a pro-inflammatory effect. So for all of these things, I feel that it's still very individual for the benefits, and you always have to try and see how things go. Now, when it comes to vegan options, I should have covered the brand name of that one. There is really no vegan source of collagen. So most of the bottles that are on it should say something like booster or builder, like you see on these, because they may help you kind of stimulate things, but there just isn't a natural, that I know of, the true kind of collagen, but maybe there is something out there that I just still am not aware of. This was an example of bottle that said vegan collagen, but when you look at the ingredients in the back, and it's not neither of these two, it just says for snapper scale, if you see in the back. And the snapper is really like the red fish and the snapper. So it really wasn't a true plant-based source of collagen. So this is what I had to say today for the two things that I decided to tackle on phosphates, on collagen, things that people have asked me. And I have to tell you that I really have to thank all my patients. My patients are the ones that come to me with these questions that I can't tackle. And then I have to ask my colleagues and all the students and residents that run around with me, my mentors and everyone, because it takes a bunch of us to put our heads together and come up with solutions that give us the answers. Some of the other things that we're tackling is niacinamide and cancer, then the sunscreen, the good, the bad, and the toxic, and CBD, is it for me? So if we did well today, we may do another one, right, Dr. Kim? All right, thank you so much for everyone's attention, and thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mesinkovska. That was an amazing lecture. I'm sure everyone found it to be extremely eye-opening. I definitely learned quite a few things. We have two questions. One of them you answered already. One of the questions was, do people with autoimmune disorders age faster related to increased inflammation? And is there anything that folks with autoimmune diseases can do to help counteract this, in addition to what you've mentioned in this presentation?
So autoimmunity, I have to tell you, I think we're going to kind of uh, start going further away for using it in the sense we have. Because what are some of the dogmas we have about autoimmunity? One is that you have an overreactive immune system, right? So if you have an overreactive immune system, maybe you're not susceptible to infections as much, right? Because your immune system is so active and it cleans things and you don't get as many cancers. Well, that's not true. With some of the advantages in genetic testing from some of the patients that we've had, there's new tests that actually show you that you can have autoimmunity and you can also have immunodeficiency. So we're learning a lot more. So there can be examples of conditions that are autoimmune when people do age faster, but there's also ones where people are protected a little bit from the aging process and from, like, for example, skin cancers. A condition such as vitiligo, you may not tend to get some spots where there's increased immunity, or maybe some of the aging or things, but because the immune system may clean up stuff. But in other autoimmune conditions, it may attack some of the fibers, such as rheumatoid arthritis, especially if you have issues with platelets, if you have some sort of a microthrombi or vasculitis. It just really depends on the condition. So the more we get in a sense of things. But overall, I will agree with whoever asked the question. When we think of autoimmunity, especially if it's not controlled, we do think of low-grade inflammation. And it's that low-grade inflammation that takes a toll and a task on the body. I have, for example, psoriasis patients who, we try to do everything without going on medications, etc. And or when we try to get things better, people do notice, as they improve, as their skin improves, that they do get more energy. And this is the way I view these things, that the skin, with the size that it is, any kind of inflammation really does take energetic toll on your body. It really does. That inflammation does not come with any price. So that fatigue, that mental fog, that feeling of like exhaustion, the prodrome before a flare when your whole body aches, that is really that inflammation put in a task. So I think ultimately that is some of the stuff. So how do we prevent it is really by controlling the source of what it is. And if we can't control it, by trying to hose down some of that inflammation so it doesn't take the toll that it does.
Thank you. That was a wonderful answer. And I don't know about dealing with autoimmune diseases to counteract aging, but at the Institute, we do have a lot of options, in terms of helping our patients to deal with their autoimmune issues. There could be environmental impact, gastrointestinal, mind-body things that we can look into to support our patients, to help them really try to reduce inflammation related to their autoimmune condition. The next question that we have is there an alternative to Accutane for a 20-year-old?
Depends. It really depends. I think one thing that I always say this, and my residents and some of my fellows who are probably listening to this somewhere, they've heard me say this millions of times. I don't like how the culture out there of some of the commercials on TV shows the person splashing water and the skin looks beautiful, because it really portrays a bad picture of people that have acne as people that are not trying and not taking care. I mean, acne is really the bane of my existence sometimes because it's chronic, it's relentless, and these young people and even grown-ups do a lot to try to calm it down. But it is a marker of inflammation. So some of the worst acne, for example, I have in people that have inflammatory bowel disease, such as Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. It is a little bit different way that the immune system responds and it gets a little bit angry. So we try to calm down the outside. So I have nothing against the washing, but it's just not enough in certain cases. So for the person that does not want to go on Accutane, I will say maybe try to talk with one of our naturopaths or integrative docs and try to see what's going on when it comes to your hormones and when it comes to your microbiome. The advances in a microbiome and just how the gut and the skin get related and talk to each other, we're learning more and more. In adult acne, so-called condition rosacea, we know that the gut microbiome has a huge role in that inflammation, because when we try to treat some of the conditions such as SIBO, which is the with rifaximin or some of the antibiotics, it actually calms down the rosacea on the skin. So if somebody is scared of Accutane, that's what I would say. When it comes to Accutane, I think we dermatologists, we were so used to some of the stronger vitamin A's that when Accutane was actually made to be the safest in the whole family. And when it came out, we tried to do it fast and strong to get people off of it as much as we can. But the dogma of what things were 10 years ago has changed. So instead of giving people like 80, 120, 160 a day, now we give 20, maybe 30 milligrams. So a fifth, a sixth of the dose, but things go low and slow. So there's not the need for that many labs. We don't see the side effects that people used to have. So we've changed a lot because we've learned a lot. This has been a medication that's been around for now 50 years. And in a way, you learn from your past experiences. So I think nowadays it really is the lowest, purest form of vitamin A that we can try to give people without anything. So that's what you have to ask. If you're gonna go and try to do this, and I know certain places, like it's not even physicians, like it's usually nurses that give like a standard dose, no more cookie cutter. I think we all deserve better. So you ask the provider for low and slow, and you treat yourself with the minimal side effects. So those are my two thoughts.
Okay, we have another question. Is chicken broth or bone broth enough as a replacement for collagen supplements?
So I was actually reading some of those like rugby studies, and it does seem that you do need extra, but it is pretty good source. So it's not as much as the supplements, but it depends of the concentration. Now, I know that for example, for pediatric cancers, like after they survive, some of the hospitals in the area actually do send some of the kids organic bone broth as they recover. And there is, especially for kids, there may be enough. For adults, the supplements do tend to have a little bit more than the bone broth. But if you're going to be a person that's going to drink it every day, hey, I feel more comfortable with natural things too. So just making sure that the sources that you get it from are trusted and clean, and that you don't have something that's going to get flared.
One of our attendees asked, if you don't have celiac disease, does eating gluten have any effect on your skin? And is there any point in eating organic foods?
When I have another part to this talk that just today there was not enough time, where I talk about AGEs, which are some of the glycation products. I mean, I know it sounds like really sciencey, maybe, but maybe not. But it's ways that we measure some of the aging things in the skin. And there were studies where they did organic milk from cows fed like organic stuff versus non-organic. So there are actually things that say that organic is better. Now, do I eat organic all the time? No, it's like 3 times more expensive. And, I was a broke student and resident most of my life. So I can't even pretend I was like a good person forever and ever. But I think there may be some science to back up some of it. So it may not be unnecessarily true. Now, when it comes to celiac, we just wrote an article where we talk about celiac sensitivities. You should come up in the Journal of Online Dermatology. So it's a free access and open access, where we kind of summarize gluten sensitivities versus true celiac. True celiac and skin really, I mean, we have conditions that are very strong manifestations of celiac disease. And when we recognize them as dermatologists, and we work with our gastroenterologist colleagues to get people under control. But we also noticed that there is such thing as sensitivity. So most of our naturopaths and nutritionists that we have at Samueli will be great to guide you through this. I do recommend for certain people, and now for psoriasis, we do know as a chronic condition that there may be component of gluten sensitivity in people. So we do recommend, I will tell people, try to do more rice and corn, but it needs to be a little bit long-term. I think not even 2 months is enough. Now, this is not backed up. This is all anecdotal from me, but there is evidence that it may play a role in chronic inflammation in people that don't have celiac. How do we figure these people out, and what are the markers until we get better tests? I'm still not sure, but that's where my naturopaths come in, and they always keep me abreast and who work together with me when it comes to analyzing these patients. So Dr. Dominguez, Dr. Palladino, Dr. Quinn are much more versed in this, and they help me figure out patients.
Do you have any integrative recommendations for perioral dermatitis?
So perioral dermatitis, we consider to be type of rosacea. And we do try to figure out more in that scenario what the gut flora is doing, whether there's some small bowel intestinal overgrowth, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, and whether there's any kind of inflammation. So that will be kind of an example where this can be tried, especially if it fails things. Now, I always have to make sure lately, because of everybody's wearing masks, we are seeing a little bit of a changed flora, because you all have to remember there's stuff that lives inside, there's a little bit of stuff that lives outside too, and especially in our nose, that's where Staphylococcus likes to live. So we just have to make sure it's true perioral dermatitis. There's not a little component of Staphylococcus. There's not a little component of one of the yeasts that lives on our skin, which really will just take a little bit of zinc shampoo or something else. So things that look like perioral dermatitis should be addressed a little bit with a more detail, because it does tend to be chronic and recurrent, especially when you kind of takes a while to figure out what's kind of flaring you. But it is a reflection, again, of that internal propensity for inflammation to go a certain way.
I have a question for you. My question is, you know, there's definitely things in the media about the vampire facelift, which is platelet-rich plasma that's applied to the skin or the head area for regrowth of hair. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts about it for the skin, including potentially acne or wrinkles, and then also for the hair.
So for the hair, our last patient of the day actually today was somebody who had lost, when we first met her, almost most of her hair on her face and her body. And I said, on her head and her body. And I said, I'm not going to do just PRP, but she couldn't do it she couldn't do any of the other medications because of other things she had. And we just did PRP. And I would say that about 80% of her hair on her scalp is back. And today was our 4th PRP. So after 3 PRP, so every time I say I'm never going to do it to somebody that has no hair, there's always an example of somebody that perseveres and does well. I think that a PRP is just a good source of growth factors for the scalp. As we kind of grow up, our hair miniaturizes, so it's a little bit further for the food source. So the way I look at it is more like a fertilizer and anti-inflammatory thing. It's not a one and done thing. Usually the way it's done is you do 3 sessions, 1 month apart. But I would tell you that after 2 sessions, we usually kind of evaluate with the patients. We're like, do we like where we are? Do we think we're moving in a certain direction or not? But after 1 session, it's very difficult to see much. And then we decide how long does it stay. And some of my patients, most of them, they will last about 3 months, 3 to 4 months. Some are lucky, they last 6 to 9, but I have a whole subset of very inflamed patients in whom the PRP effects only last like 5 to 6 weeks, and that's it. And you can see the color of their scalp going back to like this. So it just depends on what kind of condition they have. But if it wasn't money, if it didn't cost the money that it costs, and if it was something I can prescribe to you on your insurance, I'd be like, have one every 2 weeks, because it hurts a lot, maybe not every week. But I do believe in it as a thing for the scalp. When it comes to the face, I think it does help. I always, when I do somebody's head, I'll put a little drops here on the eyes to try to promote some of the collagen because of some of the studies that are out there. When we do the face, when you combine, it's best to be combined with microneedling, because the microneedling on its own promotes stuff. So the combination is probably going to be better with both together. I don't do much vampire facelift just because we're busy and we have much better tools in a way. But every time we do something on the scalp, I always try to ask if somebody wants some snuck in somewhere. So whether it's a little bit in their folds, I like just to see what a filler maybe will look like down the line, a little bit for the dark circles, just to make us happy.
Thank you. We have a few other questions. We have some time. How are you doing, Dr. Mesinkovska? You all right?
I'm good. I had 100 slides. Sorry, I went through them so quick. So I talk fast, and with the Saxon, it's a great combination. But I was scared I was going to go over time. So thank you so much for inviting me. And I do hope we make this a regular thing, like once a year or whatever. And I hope we get to put a little bit more in writing in the Insider. And if people want to have access to some of our publications, they can always look me up by my last name. I do have a couple of last names going out there. One is my maiden, this is my married, but you'll be able to find us somehow. And if you have any questions, just reach out to us at Samueli. And if I don't know how to answer it, because I definitely don't know much, I'm still learning a lot in the integrative field. I do have wonderful colleagues who will help out. I will say when it comes to skin, a bunch of us just finished this Korean traditional medicine. So that's where I'm certified. That's what I did during my COVID year. And just the value of acupuncture when it comes to skin health and the value of the threads that we all do. That's something that has just made me be more excited about some of the things that are out there and just learning from traditional things and making them modern. I think that's what's going to be my focus for the rest of my year.
All right. Well, we have a few other questions. I'll just mention a few of them. One attendee wanted to know, are there any certain moisturizers or ingredients that you think are more effective?
I have a whole talk on that, so I'm not gonna say too much on that because
well, we could save that for
there's
our
no
next
simple
integrative one. Our
yeah,
next
that's what I
integrative
was gonna
insider
say.
live.
But some of the hyaluronic acid stuff that's out there is just too big to go in some of those things. So I would just if yeah, when it comes to anti-aging over a certain age, sometimes it's wiser not to get a $300 cream, but to get the $300 laser, because that laser is going to poke holes. They're going to make your body do its thing. Or the ultrasound that's heated is going to make your body build its own, rather than putting stuff that's outside and maybe we'll make it in, maybe make it in a little bit. And I think that's one of the paradigm shifts that we all have to kind of start thinking, because we all want that magic cream, but really the magic is in here. It's just, how do you awaken it? So how do you awaken it? So right now at Building in Fashion Island, we have a machine called Selfie Wave, which we're testing on many lucky people who got it for free. And it's doing nice. It's like tightening the face, but all it does is just heats it up to a special temperature, and it's ultrasound, the same safe stuff you use to look at babies in your belly, right? So safe ways, but you just heat up a little bit, and then the body makes its own collagen to do it. So it's variable. If your body's better at doing it, you're going to get a little bit better results. But these are some of the things where I feel that maybe the $100 that we're going to go to the fancy cream should go towards your little bank for that little bit of a better procedure, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I know we have some other questions, but I'm going to end the questions now. Thank you, everyone. If you still have questions, try to come and see Dr. Mesinkovska in our clinic in Newport Beach off Fashion Island.
Or the colleagues.
And her colleagues. So thank you so much for joining us for Integrative Insider Live Community Lecture. Upon ending the webinar, a pop-up window will have a valuable survey on this evening's event. So please help us improve our community offerings by letting us know what you think and any topics you want Dr. Mesinkovska to talk about on our next ones. We will also be emailing 5 key takeaways from this session to the email address provided at registration. So save the date for our next Integrative Insider Live to be scheduled on Thursday, April 22nd, with members of our wonderful acupuncture team, where the panel will be speaking about the different acupuncture modalities. Thank you so much, and see you guys next time.
Bye. Thank you.